selfish and cruel after all I've done to make you happy. I was even pregnant with your baby.
You know what I love about that scene, Dan?
Yes.
You could have taken it out of context, and it's basically like an Oscar bait clip, right? For like Best Actress, right?
Of course, yes.
Incredible.
Yeah, come on. I mean, like, who goes to see that movie? What are you expecting? And then you get like that at the end, and you're like, okay, I get it. I got what I signed up for, and then a lot more.
Yeah.
Right?
It's really I think also a really good quandary to consider with our brand new cycle of episodes surrounding the idea of camp in cinema. But before we get too deep into it, kick it off with a proper intro, co-host.
Hello, welcome to Film Trace. This is a podcast where we trace the life of a film from conception to production, all the way to release and reception. It is our 8th cycle season. I think we're called seasons. I'm going with season. 8th season of Film Trace, folks. We're approaching 100 episodes of the podcast. And this season, we are talking about camp cinema. Chris, I'll let you sort of give the intro to camp because I think this is your idea, and it was definitely one of the better ideas we've ever had. So I want you to take credit for it.
Well, thank you. I mean, it dates actually back to a few years ago when the Met Gala had its camp theme for the red carpet.
Okay, yeah.
And that's when it first kind of caught my eye in the discourse. Like, of course, I had heard the term campy being used to describe lots of things, including movies I love and movies I laugh at because they're so bad, and therefore I still love them, but in a different kind of way. And it's always kind of caught my eye and ear because perhaps the closest corollary from back when we were in our 20s, maybe like the 2000s, that was the rampant use of the term guilty pleasure, right?
Yes. Okay.
But camp dates back even further than that, with Susan Sontag's essay Notes on Camp from 1964. And there's obviously been countless interpretations of this over the years, but I bring up the Met Gala in particular because I had a student, I advised my high school's newspaper where I teach, and my student wanted to write about the Met Gala. And so it was difficult trying to explain to a 16-year-old what exactly this theme was that they were doing. Like, it was a big deal for kids that were into fashion and celebrity and pop culture, but it's one of those terms that you can't quite get a solid grasp on, and that's part of its allure, right? Is that
of course,
it has this kind of je ne sais quoi indefinability that creates kind of a perfect ground for podcast discourse.
Of course, yeah, a good back and forth.
Yeah, and so why don't you, Dan? Like, when this was brought up, like, what's your kind of personal history with this term, and whether you've come to understand it differently nowadays versus perhaps when you first heard it?
Definitely, when I was younger, like maybe like a high schooler, and maybe probably even into college, the idea of camp to me was just something that was like overtly silly for the point of being silly, almost surrealist. And I didn't get it or love it, to be honest with you. I mean, it wasn't something that I was attracted to, or it didn't click with me. It wasn't really until I got more into like literary theory studies and stuff like that in school that it became a little bit more apparent, like when we talk about like deliberate camp, what that really means and how it can be exciting. I think it's like the more you know about the genre that the camp is sort of settling into or trying to kind of play with the discourse of a genre, the more interesting it becomes.
Mm.
And I think, post college is when I really sort of became more aware of the intellectual aspect of camp.
Sure,
Because like
sure.
it's very easy to just be like John Waters, Pink Flamingos, like what? It's like over the top and extravagant and artifice and all of these things that we would consider camp. But there is a very much intellectual thread running through the sensibility of camp. Which is what really excites me about it, because it's people playing with convention and genre, and sometimes deliberately, sometimes not.
Mhm.
And I think that's really what we're going to dive into. But yeah, it's something that I had no background on when I was younger, but as I've gotten older, I've become much more attracted to, I would say.
Yeah, yeah, and it's interesting how that like crossover tends to congeal and coalesce more when I don't know, we've got some years under our belts, and I
Yes.
think
Uh-huh.
when you're a younger uh, film fan or reader or English major, things tend to take on a lot more of a definitive shape, and you kind of get bored with that after a while.
Yeah.
And to some degree, I feel like we've been trying to like push the boundaries a little bit with the themes that we've been focusing on throughout the course of Film Trace, but there is something just like deliciously genreless about camp,
Yes.
because
True.
this season more than any other, we are running the gamut between horror and action and comedy and drama and romance. Like, that's one of the great appeals, I think, of camp, is that it does transcend a lot of categorization, despite everybody's tendency to want to categorize things by notions of camp. And speaking of that, that's probably a decent segue for explaining how we paired up our films this season, because it's different than past ones where it was just simply like we wanted to have an entree and an aperitif, a shot and then a chaser,
Yeah.
of films from the same decade. But that didn't make as much sense for this round, especially when Sontag, in her original essay, speaks to camp as kind of a binary of sorts, of having this duality to it, that can show up in very deliberate ways, where there's authorial intent in making something campy, making it over the top because that's the desired outcome of the author, and therefore the director, the cast, the crew, the actual final product of the film is a piece of art that feels very well considered. But then on the other side of that, you have what she refers to as naive camp, where it's perhaps, intended still to be a work of art, or at least some kind of, consumable story.
Yeah.
And it can range from just like being over the top just by sheer force of nature, of the many kind of clusterfucks that can happen when making a movie, so those kind of guilty pleasure ideas. But it also can like be these kinds of movies that are incredibly melodramatic on purpose, and they
Mhm.
attempt to hit a certain note, and in some people's eyes fail, some people's eyes succeed. Nevertheless, it's typically eminently watchable, even when it's just like horrifically bad, right?
Yeah.
Is that a decent explanation of what we're doing here with these pairs of films?
Yeah, and I think in the very classic sort of like French essay, we're gonna get to the thesis at the end, not the beginning. So we're gonna kind of, I think, work around it. I mean, obviously, it's been how many years since she wrote this? So much has happened since then. Reading it though, Notes on Camp is wow, it's a brilliant set of like insights about this thing that didn't really have much of a name back then. And it is a really fascinating beginning point to the conversation.
Yes.
And I think we'll really start to fight back and forth a little bit with like what this notion of naive or pure camp really is. right? She says essentially that like if it's pure camp or naive, not deliberate, there's a seriousness to it that fails. And that but not everything that tries to be serious and fails is camp. It has to have this mixture of the exaggerated, the fantastic, the passionate, the naive. So yeah, it's going to be all that's kind of subjective. And I think when we selected these films, we put, we're trying to sort of prod each other a little bit into sort of finding some gray area in all of it, because a lot of it is gray area. And even, she says something, I think, in the beginning, I say, what is it? I look it up real quick. Camp is esoteric, something of a private code, a badge of identity, even among small urban cliques. Right? Because you kind of talked about this a little. It is a code. And it is something that is mutable and changing over time. And she also says that in her essay. So yeah, it's kind of it's a moving target that's never really settled as to what is, camp in general. And I love that's like such a like what's postmodernism and like we don't really know, like all that sort of stuff. But there are guardrails to it, I think, that we can kind of set up. And I think it's going to be tough with these movies though, to sort of like get somewhere close to a consensus of what camp is really all about. How do you want to do this? Do you want to dive into Pearl? Do you want to dive into Madame Web? There are two choices for the 2020s.
Right. And I was curious to see your inclination. I feel like I want to talk about Pearl, but that's just because that's the one of the two movies that I was awake for. So
yeah, tell us the story. Well, let's tell our story about Madame Web. How about you go first?
Sure.
When did you see it and what happened?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, we were looking for an anchor text, so to speak, for the season, and Madame Web, or as you pronounce it, Madame Web, was definitely like high on our radar because of, film Twitter doing its thing and hyping up the next great bad movie, right?
Yeah.
This happened with Morbius, another Sony comic book movie entry. It kind of fizzled out because it wasn't so bad it's good, or really that enjoyable of a movie to watch because it has Jared Leto in so many frames. But this one seemed even more ripe for the camp crowd.
Yeah.
And I think part and parcel of that was Dakota Johnson at the center. Has a very interesting personality, both on screen and off. And I think it was one of those, I don't know, it's not lightning in a bottle. I don't know, piece of shit in the bottle where it's just
nightmare in a bottle. I don't
nightmare in a bottle. Yeah. Where all these factors came together. And so like everybody that has ever admitted to enjoying what it's like to watch a bad movie was excited to see it, including myself.
Yeah.
However, I saw it last week, and there's a number of factors that go into why someone falls asleep during a movie. It's not as simple as it's boring. I saw it late at night because I wanted to go after my kids were in bed, but my weekends were booked, so I had to go see it on a weeknight. And anyways, I made the very bad decision of wearing my pajamas to the movie theater for the first time ever. And I just thought, like, if anything invited that, it was Madame Web.
Yeah.
So I was super comfortable. And of course, there was only a few people at this 9 p.m. showing. And I was doing okay. I usually like try to grab like a Coke or something to keep myself awake for these late night screenings. Didn't have my credit card on me, so I was like, oh well, no, I'm gonna
ride it out.
Yeah. I guess it's gonna be a dry run. But then just like about halfway through the movie, I just went out like a light. Like I just don't even remember. What was the
last scene you remember?
The last scene I remember, I believe, was her stealing the taxi.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So, yeah. I mean, maybe like, halfway through midway through the second act or something. I don't know.
That sounds like really early in the movie for
maybe it's early in the second act.
Like a third of the movie.
Oh God. Yeah, no, maybe it was earlier than halfway through.
I had to psych myself up because I went on I went last Friday as a 9:45 show. And this is theater that it's IMAX laser, so I will only see movies in IMAX laser now, like nothing else. It's so good.
Even
Like it's
Madam Web.
it's disgusting. Every other movie is disgusting unless it's an IMAX web or IMAX web.
No, that's the next one.
IMAX laser, or whatever they're called, Dolby Theater.
Yeah. You're
But
insane. But go on.
I had to bring a lot of candy. I went with Pippa. She was like, "Yeah, let's go see it." She's a big Marvel person, and the theater is like it's massive, and there is literally 5 other people there. And this is like, I'm like 10 miles from the center of Philadelphia. It's not exactly like a cow town, and there's just nobody there. And I might have watched the cam version first, at least the first half of it. Not illegal, I guess, to watch a cam version. But so I kind of knew I was in the cam version. I was just like, I have been following this film very closely because it's just, there's something about this movie that is intriguing to me. It's like, when the trailer dropped, the reaction was like caustic. I don't like, people just bit into it and were like, this is the most awful thing I've ever seen in my life. I was like, did you people live through the late 90s, early 2000s? This was what like every comic book movie was like up until like X2, right? Like this was the norm. It's like Spawn or something. Although maybe that's like sacrilegious. I haven't seen that in a long time. But you know what I mean? Like Fantastic Fours, like the early like odd stuff was just terrible. It was just over the top, completely. It's a comic book movie. No one took a comic book movie seriously until probably the first X-Men, Spider-Man, and like whatever it was, 2002 or something. That's, and then like Batman Begins and Dark Knight comes along, and then like all of a sudden becomes like this, comic book movies are serious things. They're serious things about adult topics. But before that, they were fun. And so this one kind of looks like a throwback to that style. And it was, and like watching it and sitting there, I was like, oh yeah, like this is, Adam Scott shows up. There's like lots of Pepsi commercials within the movie. Like you're just like, this is, it's light, it's breezy. But I mean, within the context, what is so odd about this is that we know that like those movies back in the late 90s, early 2000s, when like comic book movies were not interesting or serious. But younger people don't. And it's almost like younger people are like angry at how bad, quote unquote, bad this movie is. And I'm just like, what's going on? Like, this is like, it's just, number one, it's just a movie. 2, it's like not that big of a deal. It's not MCU. It's Sony Spider-Verse. Like, this is Venom 2. I mean, people, like, that's the thing. Have you seen Venom and Venom 2?
Just the first one.
Venom 2, Let There Be Carnage is just as absurd as this movie and not that much better, to be honest with you. But like people are like, oh yeah, it's still great. I was very intrigued by the whole thing because I did not get the reaction to the trailer and like the abysmal box office. I was like, people, I don't know what's going on where people are, I don't know, they're burned out by the MCU situation and they're pissed off at like that Marvel's wasn't like perfect or The Godfather or something. And like now it's comic book backlash time. Is that what's happening?
Oh yeah, we're in the thick of it for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things that, despite also being very much kind of done, I guess, with the MCU, for lack of a better word, the thing that made all the hype around this film exciting was because it felt, like you said, even the caustic backlash to the trailer, it felt very breezy, just like the film itself, where it was just like people having fun, taking a shot at a ridiculous line of narration about, your mom dying in the Amazon or whatever. And I don't know, there was this kind of underlying maybe you took it a little more mean-spirited than I did, because I felt like there was this underlying like community building happening around it. It felt a lot more mean-spirited when it was targeted towards Morbius.
Morbius?
Right?
I don't know. Who doesn't
Whatever.
matter?
Mobius strip? No, that's a different
now
thing.
This is a fascinating point, Christopher. This is a fascinating point. Because it's like, The Morbius stuff was, it was like a whole another meme language that was created, with that
Yes.
movie, and it, had a life of its own. I guess I don't. That felt a lot more lighthearted and fun. This just
Oh,
kind of felt
really?
mean to me. This just felt mean. I don't know. Maybe I'm just misreading it or something. But
Because the thing about the Morbius memeing was that it led to like Jared Leto thinking he was like gonna be in on the joke, right? And he did that like a viral video where he was reading the script to Morbius 2, It's Morbin Time,
yeah.
and it, and then Sony ended up re-releasing
Re-releasing it,
Morbius,
yeah.
and
And
it fizzled
crashed
even worse than the first time.
Yeah.
So that very much felt like, oh God, no, we weren't trying to get you to, we don't want to watch this movie. We just want to make fun of it. Whereas Madam Web, I felt like so much of the memeing and excitement over making fun of it came from, I don't know, I saw like a ton of tweets, and of course it's anecdotal, but like people actually wanted to go see this movie. It's like, we want to see Dakota Johnson like we want to see what her face looks like when she's in turmoil, because she said on the press circuit that talking to tennis balls on sticks in front of a green screen is is
I
like,
love Dakota Johnson.
yeah, like she has this aloofness to her that
Yeah.
Jared Leto doesn't.
She's in on it.
Right.
Like she's not
From the start, not like halfway through, once you
no.
trying to pivot and make make lemonade out of piss or whatever.
Well, I was one of those people. I saw the trailer and I was like, this looks fun and like really
Yeah.
dumb. And Dakota Johnson is fun in movies because she just doesn't really care. And yeah, there was certainly, and that to me is like essential, like part of like the camp language.
Exactly.
Is like you're in on it with other people, and it's like it's a joke, but the punchline isn't necessarily apparent like up front. It's like a hidden punchline or like one or two layers below of what's happening.
Right.
But no one showed up. No one showed up.
Well, that's the thing, is like, and on our spreadsheet for the show, it seemed pretty early on that this was definitively going to be naive camp. That while Dakota Johnson was in on it from the start of her press tour, it still very much felt like everybody was just kind of ramshackly put together. The director, S.J. Clarkson, this is her debut. She was a longtime TV director.
Yeah.
She had already been tapped by Marvel because she had done episodes of Jessica Jones and The Defenders. And like, it very much feels like we did not try to make a bad movie, right? We did not try to make an absurdist comic book movie. Maybe they tried to just make it fun, but I don't know. It's interesting looking at the interviews with Clarkson in comparison to some of the more viral interviews with Dakota Johnson, because it does. We don't get a lot of that same kind of breezy attitude towards it. It feels more like there is some element of taking the origin story of Uncle Ben's coworker a little too seriously, right?
Oh yeah, there's different layers to this movie, and I think, but at its core, there is an attempt to make a semi-serious comic book origin movie.
Right. Yeah.
There's an attempt, because it's not like, I mean, what would be like the counter, like maybe Batman and Robin, where
Sure.
that feels very much like, well, let's just have fun. I've got tens of millions of dollars I can throw away, an amazing A-list cast. Let's just kind of screw things up and see what happens.
And that's an interesting corollary, because it almost feels like, because both for Batman and Robin and Batman Forever are Schumacher, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So like Batman and Robin is the naive camp, and Batman Forever arguably is more of the deliberate camp.
Yeah.
Like Schumacher's actually trying to like take the reins from Burton, but Batman and Robin is just like, fuck it.
Like, cares?
Yeah,
like,
nipples,
let's just
sure.
like have fun. But I think you're right. I think like it falls. Madam Web falls into the naive because it attempt to do something. Now, where it becomes a little bit gray area is it bad enough and outlandish enough to really be what Sontag would call pure camp or naive camp?
Mhm.
I don't know. I think that's arguable one way or the other.
Yeah.
It's not exactly like a cookie cutter film, though. Like, she does kind of go for it.
Yeah, I don't know. Would you call it a big swing? I don't know if I would go that far.
Yeah.
I think
it's also a comic book movie, so it's hard to tell.
right.
Yeah.
I think there's some very strange choices that are definitely outside the scope of like the formula of comic book movies that has historically like been what has made the genre successful over recent years. I think the biggest one that turns out I did not miss, even though I fell asleep, was that there are essentially 4 other super powered people besides Madame Web herself.
Yeah.
And we really only see their superhero alter egos in like a early flash forward / premonition dream sequence.
Mm-hmm.
That's like Sydney Sweeney's character and the other 3 Spider Women, which is, as like a kid who grew up on comic books, like those are the characters that I knew. I have no idea who Madame Web was.
Yeah.
And yet here it's this story all about like the least known quantity in this world of Spider Women. And I think that coupled with, everything from the the stolen taxi that I tried reading a little bit to catch myself up on what I missed, but I think it almost becomes like a unintentional running joke that like the taxi just becomes her car. It's not like she just stole it for one climactic sequence. Like she even
she steals it and like drives around it the whole movie.
and goes abroad and then comes back and is back in the taxi.
Oh, wait, is that true? Maybe you're right. I couldn't remember. Yeah, she goes to Peru.
Right.
She does. There was this one weird moment. So like, she steals the kids and the cab, and she takes them away from the city and leaves them in the woods.
Yes.
And says, "Hey, you 3, just stay here for 3 hours, and I'm gonna take off in this cab and head back into the city." It's also a period piece. It takes place 2003.
Yes.
So it's like 20, good 20 years old. So no like smartphones and stuff like that. There's a very curious scene with the cab though. She gets back to her apartment, and then removes the license plate from the cab, and then goes. It's like, wouldn't that make you stick out more if you're a cab without a license plate, right? Like if you left the license plate on there, like how could you tell the difference between like the 12,000 different cabs in New York City?
Right.
And it's just like there's I think the thing that stood out to me immediately when watching this, and like what actually got me really excited about going to see it in the theater, was that it's so poorly done. Like everything about this movie, from like the editing to especially the sound design, and people have called this out in a lot of the reviews, but like what do you call it? Not we record off screen. It's like AMR or something.
Oh, ADR.
ADR, yeah.
Yeah.
That's like
it's so bad.
That's an art form. That is not super easy to do. Like because it revolves around like matching the dialogue recorded in the studio to the actual their lips as you're watching it. It's an art form, right? And it's like a detailed art form. And it's like they just were like, oh, screw it. Who cares? No one gives a shit.
Yeah,
like that's what it kind of felt like. And it's like this movie was $80 million. This is not a $5 million micro budget film. And the other movie that we're talking about, Pearl, was shot for what, $1 million? So this movie had 80x the budget than Pearl, but like Pearl was able to get the basics right, and this wasn't. I mean, it's one of those movies that it's kind of infuriating. Like there's like stuff. And you saw this because you didn't fall asleep yet, but the beginning where the spider people come and take the mother to their cave and put her in water. She looks like a precog. It's like a precog situation from my note report. And she burns the child. And it's just like everything about that was like, is this the Batman TV series from the 1960s? It was like so outlandish. I was like, who is taking this seriously, even as like a creative output, or you know what I mean? Like, it's just like, I don't know. It just felt very like a high school drama production or something. And
Right.
like, there's no way she intended that.
Yeah.
There's no way, and I don't want to pick on the director or anything like that, because that's not fun. But it kind of seemed TV-esque, if I'm going to be honest.
Sure.
Like, it
Yeah.
kind of reminded like a like a UPN show in like the mid '90s. That was
Yeah.
a thing.
And I mean, she's a TV director, so that's
Yeah,
probably. I mean,
but
it's
we're also in peak TV era.
true.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, TV directors now are basically like filmmakers. But like, what the hell happened? I just don't get it. What happened?
I don't know, but the Marvel TV shows have already that was part of the downfall of the MCU, right?
True. Yeah.
Is the incredible decline in quality, even for those of us that are more skeptical of Marvel movies in general. I think there's obviously other aspects to this, and I think you could look at everything from the cinematography. This was done by the guy who did Dark Phoenix and The Kingdom, Smoking Aces, but also the guy that did the first Avatar and did Spider-Man No Way Home. So it's like you're basically putting like I don't know, entry level competence coupled with like a journeyman director of photography that's not really going to like. But nobody is interested here, I think, in pushing boundaries. This very much feels like so much of the naive camp films we have slated for the rest of this series.
Yeah.
More on the side of like, let's churn something out that will, give us a profit. And we don't even care how much of a profit it is. And obviously it fails even on that level. But it's definitely not on the side of naive camp where you've got directors like putting their entire hearts out onto this, pages of the script and coming up with these insane, fantastical set pieces either. So like, it's I don't know, the quote I have from Sontag's essay, because I would like to kind of pair every film we discuss with a quote, and then maybe this could be also a potential transition into discussing Pearl in more in depth. But I like this one a lot. She says, "Perhaps though it is not so much a question of the unintended effect versus the conscious intention, as it is the delicate relation between parody and self-parody." And she goes on to
Yes.
use Hitchcock as an example for that. And, I think most people, especially including like my younger self, would be like, how could you possibly call Hitchcock camp? He's like, the master of suspense.
Yeah.
But, the more that you watch filmmakers like Hitchcock, or it sounds inappropriate to put Ty West in this same sentence, but I mean, like, put Pearl side by side, and you have a really strong case for like an authorial intent that isn't as important as the kind of playing with that balance of absurdity and drama, of the ridiculous and the human. Whereas with Madam Web, it's just like, do I see any of that there? Like, even Adam Scott, who's like, I think a pretty talented comedic actor, is unable to like bring Uncle Ben to life on screen. So I don't think there's really any of that balance in Madam Web, or a lot of the movies we're going to talk about this season, compared to Pearl. And that's part of the reason why camp is so elastic.
Yeah, and I think that like it gains its power through these friction points. And it's like, when you look at Pearl, which is, a very specific kind of parody of an artist, another parody they looked at of his work, Douglas Sirk, right? A very sort of Americana. We did Far From Heaven in the 1950s season. There's a very specific mood and tone and texture that Ty West is trying to hit with Pearl that he does hit. And at the same time, there's this absolutely absurdist, violent undercurrent to the whole thing. It's just layered. It's layered in a very deliberate, craftsman-like way. It's almost like it's like the equivalent of like $1,000 wedding cake that has just been doted over by a chef as like an expression of love or whatever. Like, this is my fine art as a chef. Whereas like Madame Web's a sheet cake from Kroger.
There you go.
know, it's like it, but that it's the similar ideas to some degree in terms of maybe overall aesthetic, just over the top, extravagant, artifice. But there's such a different amount of work going into each one. And again, I say that as like, Madam Web was an $80 million budget, probably $100 million when the sources get out, a $100 million movie. And Pearl's like $1 billion. And it just goes to show you that you can throw money at a movie, and it's always going to be an extension of the artists that are making it. And I don't know, like Pearl to me is just such a better work of camp on so many different levels than Madam Web. I mean, Madam Web is a throwaway movie. No one's going to remember it. Nobody. Even the people that made it. Dakota Johnson didn't even remember the movie when on half these press kits, right? And it's just like, it's so... But the bigger question is like, is there a difference in value? You know what I mean? Because camp would say that there isn't. Like, if you're like really diving into camp and what it's all about and the lens that is camp, you can't make value judgments on films. You just can't, because that's not the point of what it is. But Pearl is just a different beast. It's a different beast. And when did you first see this when it came out?
No, I didn't. I didn't see this or X, the
that
precedes it.
So this is your first time seeing it?
So here's the deal. I finally saw X because I wanted to watch them in order on HBO Max or just Max, I guess it's called now.
Max.
when I got COVID.
Okay.
And I think I have a weird relationship with these films compared to most people, because like I knew that Pearl was the more hyped one, but I actually really, really liked X.
Okay.
And so it made me super hyped to see Pearl. So then I like immediately bought the Blu-ray for Pearl, because it wasn't streaming anywhere yet. And I was like, I would be very surprised if I'm going to regret this Blu-ray purchase. And then I pressed play on it, and then I started getting better. And so I really was like, basically had it on the background. And I'm not a person that can like really comprehend, much less like recount or form an opinion on a movie that's playing in the background, because I was like trying to catch up for work and everything. And anyways, I gave it an honest watch, probably a first time watch, but technically a rewatch for this episode. And yeah, I mean, it was like everything clicked. Like, I don't know. I get that there's so much about this film, whether with regards to sense of place and like experimenting with form and just straight up like Mia Goth's central performance, that eclipse X in a number of ways. There is still something about X that like the trashiness of it and like the kind of almost like throwaway nature of it is really appealing to me still, especially because I hadn't really enjoyed a Ty West movie until these two films. So I'm curious about that aspect for you. I mean, these are clearly his breakthroughs. He's making Maxine the third film in the trilogy right now. And A24, I'm sure, was a big part of this push to land him in the big hot seat. But I mean, House of the Devil is fine. Innkeepers is fine.
Wow, interesting. House of the Devil to me is like foundational. Oh my god,
Interesting. Yeah.
it is so. I mean, for me personally, that is someone who makes that movie. What that came out in 2009. I remember just like randomly coming across it and like it started or something on HBO, and I was just like, "What the hell is this?" I thought it was a movie from the 80s
Oh,
until
really?
until I like kept like watching. I was like, "Wait, what?" I mean, yeah, House of the Devil to me is like a phenomenal. It doesn't. I think the ending's pretty poor,
Yeah.
but like the vibe is just
Yeah.
unbelievable.
Yeah. You let movies slide by on vibe, I think.
I do always. Well, not always. That's not true. That's not true. I'm a big writing fan and
True.
like structure fan. But yeah, I mean, and that's the funny thing about that is like I don't actually like X all that much.
Really?
I just rewatched it last night, and I remember watching it right when it came out, and I was super stoked for it because it's basically like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but like reversed and kind of Ty West's own demented sense of that movie. It wasn't grotesque enough for me. It wasn't like transgressive enough. And the ways that like I think Texas Chainsaw Massacre is like a masterpiece of transgression, but
Mhm.
like it's not overt transgression because there's like no gore in that movie really, the first one.
Yeah.
And yeah, the X just didn't land for me. But Pearl, I didn't even want to see Pearl because I didn't like X that much. I was like, okay, so you're gonna do like a movie after X and it's gonna be better, but it's so different and
It
it's
is.
such like what did Martin Scorsese say about this? He's like, it's like a pure, like he does the whole pure cinema quote for this movie, and I'm like, I kind of agree with him. Like it's bonkers. Like this is people, and this is like, I always will always love independent cinema. I guess we can call this independent cinema. It's $1 million. Come on,
Yeah.
that's like micro budget these days. And you know, Ty West is like good with that because he's doing it for a long time. He got like randomly, they're in New Zealand, everybody was kind of isolated and quarantined. He randomly got the crew of the Avatar Way of the Water to help out because they were down there in between. Their shoot wasn't happening at the time, and it's just like a collaboration with Mia Goth, who did you know her pretty well before these movies or no?
No. I mean, I think I knew her. Oh shoot, there's basically just one movie I knew her.
Cure for
from.
Wellness?
No.
Oh, okay.
Oh gosh, I gotta figure this out. Keep going though.
And I had seen her before in a couple of movies. I was like, oh yeah, like she's like, there's something fascinating about her. But yeah, seeing her in X, she's good in X, I feel like. But
It was the Suspiria remake. Sorry. Yeah.
Oh yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, she was good in that. Dakota Johnson, Link. And but in Pearl, there's something so insane about what she's doing. And it feels out of control, but it's not. Right? That is like the sign of like some of the best actors where it feels unhinged and not because of her character or what her character is doing. Obviously, she's an unhinged person, but I mean the emotional expression that she's doing it's like frightening how raw it is and open she is. But it's also highly controlled at the same time. I mean, the movie doesn't work without Mia Goth. I mean, Mia Goth makes the movie. She also wrote it or like co-wrote it with Ty West, and yeah, it's one of those. You know, if we circle back on camp on this one, you know, obviously it's deliberate in the sense of, well, why would we? You know, what's deliberate about it? It's the styling, it's the aesthetic, it's the over the topness. It revels in artifice, which to me is the key in doing deliberate camp. Is you have to understand the edges of what you're making and the like means of production and what you're doing, which kind of separates it from postmodernism a little bit, but it revels in the artifice and it finds a way to Pearl especially to have an authentic emotional narrative in extravagance of artifice. I mean, like how do you do that? It's very tough to do. Right. And I think when we talk about next episode, which I'll tease a little bit, the Love Witch is also just unbelievably done in that way, where, you know, Sontag talks about how camp is done at the expense of content. That's one of her statements. But I would tend to disagree with her that, like, on the deliberate camp side, it's a mixture of artifice and authentic and serious content. It's just a different way of expressing it. What do we think?
Yeah. No, I think so here's the thing is, like, I really like both of these films, X and Pearl. The thing that makes Pearl stand out more is not, I think you hit the nail on the head with this idea of, like, emulating the artifice in a way that feels more singular, perhaps, than how X tried to tackle the 70s style. And here we're in the 1940s, but also, like, making these cute nods to Douglas Sirk and cinema of the 50s. But the thing that, I don't know, there is this element that I'm going to use Sontag's quote pretty close to the one you just did to kind of explain myself. It says, camp is art that proposes itself seriously, but cannot be taken altogether seriously because it is, quote, too much, unquote.
Yeah.
And that's where that's where I feel like I'm at with Pearl, where it's like there is this sense of it, and you get teases of this in West's earlier work. I haven't seen all of them, but once again, Innkeepers and House of the Devil for sure do this, where it's like there is just enough wink nudging, and this is almost like he's got this lifelong friendship and semi-working relationship with Joe Swanberg, the mumblecore king, right? And there's this, so it feels like there's this almost, it like teeters on the edge of too much winking, whether it's that 8-minute monologue towards the end of the film, or like the kind of outlandish stuff she says right before she murders the projectionist. The fact that the projectionist is her, first, like, bloodied victim. There's so much there that feels like, quote, too much, but therefore I'm unable to really find anything past the artifice other than, references and winks. And I do think, like, it's a really impressive movie, but I don't know, and I'll definitely rewatch it, and I'm excited to rewatch it even as I'm saying this, ironically, but there's something missing behind it that I can't quite put my finger on, and I'm wondering if you feel that at all, because I definitely felt it.
I don't feel that.
What's behind there? What are we looking at here, other than a really, like, immaculately constructed origin story for a murderer?
I think it reminds me a little bit of like what happened to Baby Jane. We did that one this
Yes,
season,
I did get vibes from that for sure.
Like, where it's just, there's no, like, ulterior, like, deeper point to it per se, except that it's an expression of a very interesting and fascinating person, and that's really it. Right? But that expression in and of itself, without commentary about whether she's a good or a bad person or what that really means, is, I think, to me, the value of it and the deeper meaning of it. Yes, it's over the top. Yes, it's completely extravagant. Yes, it's quote unquote too much across the board. But behind that is, and this is what I was missing from X. I couldn't grab onto anything beneath all that artifice, but with this one, there's this expression, like, it feels like an authentic emotional expression from the character, of anger, of rage, of fear, of being trapped and being stuck. I mean, all that to me rang true and honest. Even though she's a psychopath and she kills people, but she's also kind of a really sad, lonely woman. Like it's a really, I don't know, there's a weird dichotomy to the whole thing where I think that's what attracts me to the movie so much is I love the artifice. I love the extravagance of it, but that's not really the draw to me. The draw is Mia Goth's performance and inhabiting that character so intimately that I believe her when she says all of these things, like the long monologue. I believe everything that she's saying. And I don't know. To me, there's a big sort of undercurrent that feels authentic to me.
Okay, because if well, take that monologue for instance from the top of the show, and I agree. Like she's definitely doing something special there and impressive, but like you lose me at the word authentic because it does feel like so carefully constructed
Oh, sure.
to be this kind of outpouring. Like that's part of the comedy behind it, is that she's not only doing this all in one take, but it's to her sister-in-law, and she goes like, past the point of what you would expect somebody who's got the secret life. It's kind of like, the Norman Bates scene in Psycho where he's basically telling Marion like I'm a killer and I'm going to kill you in a few minutes. But he doesn't outwardly say it. But here she's saying the quiet part loud. And and that's fun, it's interesting. I don't know. There's this I mean,
don't you think that type, like her character, the character of Pearl, that's something that she would do? There's almost like a naivete about everything about what she's doing.
Right,
Like,
which makes it
she's
interesting that you've got this naive protagonist, and yet you're seeing something deliberately happen. I also feel like there's maybe something going on with like, centering this very female experience, but it's through the lens of a male director and writer.
Okay.
This one is technically co-written between
Yeah.
West and Goth. I don't know. There's something where I'm not quite getting there, and I don't know. Maybe it's as simple as this, Dan. As I feel like we need to mention it. I don't know if my first real watch or this rewatch could have potentially been colored by the news that uh, Goth and West are getting sued by an extra in Maxine because she allegedly screamed and belittled this extra and stomped on him with her boot, right?
Yeah. I mean, she's
And
also married to Shia LaBeouf. I mean,
oh God, that's right. So that
right. So, and they've been together for a very, very long time.
would be like
And they
since
just,
FKA Twigs or what?
before that, no, before
Before
that.
that? Oh,
And then she
God.
re-got with him. Yeah. And now they have a child together. She's not, that's honestly, not that like, she is, I would say she probably has some troubles, right, going on.
Maybe that's where you see the authenticity.
I honestly do. Like, I feel like you can't act like that on screen, even if it's artifice, even if it's, a parody delicacy, like all this sort of like layers of creative distance that you can put between yourself and the art. But that's, she's inhabiting a lot of Pearl. And I think like with her personal life and the stuff that happened on the new movie, none of that surprises me.
Yeah.
At all. Like it, have you seen Infinity Pool?
Not yet, no.
You got to see it. She's phenomenal on it. But she's also
she's
completely unhinged. It's one of those situations where, yeah, there's a lot of her in these characters, I feel like, for better or for worse.
That's interesting. I think there's going to be a theme, at least through the next few episodes, with this question of like the unhinged auteur. Just looking through some of these that are on the docket. I don't know how much you want to tease, but perhaps we can do
Tease
some
away.
trivia first,
Yeah, let's do it.
and then we'll give them the goods on what to expect from this season of Film Trace. Okay, Dan, the trivia I've got for you this season is it's deep quote. We
Okay.
are going to share with you some other camp films of, once again, this decade. So these are, you got a relatively narrow margin to work with, 2020 to 2024. I will start with the kind of more of the cult quote, like not pretty niche, and then get progressively more obvious as to what film I'm referring to.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Go for it.
He's a Libra moon, and that says a lot.
I don't know. Keep going.
Don't call her a psychopath. That's so ableist.
Bodies, bodies, bodies?
Yeah, good work. Good work, Dan.
All right. What a great movie.
Yeah, I do love that film.
God, that movie's fun. Yeah.
I saw a little backlash on it online recently, which I didn't quite understand, but I don't know.
People are no fun.
Yeah. Okay, next one. Psychologically speaking, vengeance rarely brings the catharsis we hope for.
I don't know. Keep going.
If you want boys to respect you, show them you're serious. Shoot something. Blow it up.
I don't know. Keep going.
Okay, last quote, and then I can give you some cast and crew clues.
Okay.
You killed my sandwich.
Bottoms?
No, good guess.
I love that movie.
The actor saying all three of these quotes is Margot Robbie.
Barbie?
No, this is a superhero film.
Oh, Margot Robbie?
Yeah.
Harley Quinn.
Yeah, Birds of Prey.
This is the second to last movie I saw before the pandemic destroyed everything.
Oh, really interesting. I actually
great
enjoyed that
movie. Yeah, I love that movie. People are really negative about that one too. I don't get it.
I know, right? Okay, all right. I think you're gonna get this one pretty easily.
Okay.
You're black, I'm gay. We are so dead.
Oh man. Keep going.
Don't underestimate a straight white man's propensity for violence, Isaac. I don't care how fucking old they are.
Christ. I don't know, Scream 5, 6?
Good guess. You're in the right wheelhouse, but
Okay.
I'm very excited that I get to say this one out loud.
Okay.
I'll suck your dick, all of it.
I'll suck your dick, all of it. Halloween Ends?
Oh, no. Okay, well, this is kind of a trick question, but the actor saying this is Vince Vaughn.
Oh, Freaky?
Yeah, there you go.
Cool. Nice. That's a fun movie.
Yeah.
These are all great movies so far.
I know, right? It's camp.
What a decade we're having right now.
Yeah, we're in a moment.
People don't even get it. Wow.
Okay, this one. Oh gosh, I like this movie a lot. Here we go.
Oh no.
You weren't Pornhubbing from The Office again, were you?
Don't know. Keep going.
If heaven exists, it wouldn't be for boys like Brandon now, would it?
Ugh. Keep going.
Perpetual pets suck. They suck shit.
Strays?
One of these actors, actually, I don't think one of the actors that does not say any of these quotes is Allison Williams.
Oh, bummer. Megan.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
M3gan is I believe
M3gan. Yeah.
Okay, and last but not least, my personal favorite of the bunch, And this is gonna tip the scales for you. Maybe not so much more in the positive, Dan. Okay.
Uh-oh.
Oh my God, I love these quotes so much. In that last position, your dong went really deep. I think your dong went all the way up and touched my heart.
Oh, I should know this, but I don't. I don't know if I saw this movie.
Oh, you definitely saw this movie.
Oh, okay.
We did an episode on it.
What?
Little advanced clue. I had a dream that I made love with that man on the Pringles can.
What?
Okay,
Cocaine Bear?
No. Last but not least, every time I think of frog legs, I think of Kermit riding his bicycle and how much he used his legs. He really needed them.
I saw this movie.
Absolutely.
Give me what he got.
It was one of our biggest fights on the podcast.
Interesting. Okay.
I loved it. You hated it. And it's a camp film. It's a comedy. One of the actors saying those quotes was Kristen Wiig.
Oh, Barb and Star go to Vista Del Mar.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, I hate that movie so much.
I love it so much.
Ugh.
Okay, Dan. I'm gonna give you a final score.
Did I got 2?
I think you got 2 out of 5, maybe 2.5, because you eventually got.
Man, I'm so bad with quotes.
It's okay. It'll be an interesting season to see.
Look at the guests on here.
I know, right? The guests are gonna just demolish you.
Probably.
We're excited to announce that we're gonna try something a little different for our guest booking this season. Since camp is so intrinsically linked to the female experience and the queer experience, we're trying to, as a couple of straight white guy-ish
white males,
people, we want some perspective. So we're getting some experts on here. Our friend Molly's going to come back. Natasha from Cultured Vultures is going to return. We've got the guys from Mixed Reviews and Manish from It Pod to Be You joining us later in the season as well. But what's coming up next episode, Dan?
We're going to do The Love Witch and Black Swan. And we'll leave that up to people to know which one's deliberate and naive. But it's going to be fun. Love Witch, I just have to say, is probably my favorite movie from the 2010s. It's probably number 1, if I'm being honest.
Oh, wow.
So it's going to be a spicy episode.
Oh, my gosh. Talk about artifice.
It's so perfect. It's perfect artifice. All right. Thanks for listening. This has been Film Trace.